Yemenite Jews are those Jews who live, or once lived, in Yemen. The term may also refer to the descendants of the Yemenite Jewish community. Between June 1949 and September 1950, the overwhelming majority of Yemen's Jewish population was transported to Israel in Operation Magic Carpet. After several waves of persecution throughout Yemen, most Yemenite Jews now live in Israel, while small communities are found in the United States and elsewhere. Only a handful remain in Yemen. The few remaining Jews experience intense, and at times violent, anti-Semitism on a daily basis. Yemenite Jews have a unique religious tradition that marks them out as separate from Ashkenazi, Sephardi and other Jewish groups. Yemenite Jews are generally described as belonging to Mizrahi Jews, though they differ from the general trend of Mizrahi groups in Israel, which have undergone a process of total or partial assimilation to Sephardic culture and Sephardic liturgy. Family pedigrees. Some Jewish families have preserved traditions relating to their tribal affiliation, based on partial genealogical records passed down generation after generation. In Yemen, for example, some Jews trace their lineage to Judah, others to Benjamin, while yet others to Levi and Reuben. Of particular interest is one distinguished Jewish family of Yemen who traced their lineage to Bani, one of the sons of Peretz, the son of Judah. Early history. There are numerous accounts and legends concerning the arrival of Jews in various regions in southern Arabia. One legend suggests that King Solomon sent Jewish merchant marines to Yemen to prospect for gold and silver with which to adorn his temple in Jerusalem in 1881. The French vice-consulate in Yemen wrote to the leaders of the alliance in France that he read in a book by the Arab historian Abu al-Fada that the Jews of Yemen settled in the area in 1451 BCE. Another legend says that Yemeni tribes converted to Judaism after the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon. The Sanite Jews have a legend that their ancestors settled in Yemen 42 years before the destruction of the First Temple. It is said that under the prophet Jeremiah some 75,000 Jews, including priests and Levites, traveled to Yemen. Another legend states that when Ezra commanded the Jews to return to Jerusalem they disobeyed, whereupon he pronounced a ban upon them. According to this legend, as a punishment for this hasty action Ezra was denied burial in Israel. As a result of this local tradition, which cannot be validated historically, it is said that no Jew of Yemen gives the name of Ezra to a child, although all other biblical appellatives are used. The Yemenite Jews claim that Ezra cursed them to be a poor people for not heeding his call. This seems to have come true in the eyes of some Yemenites, as Yemen is extremely poor. However, some Yemenite sages in Israel today emphatically reject this story as myth, if not outright blasphemy. Archaeological records referring to Judaism in Yemen started to appear during the rule of the Himyarite kingdom, established in Yemen in 110 BCE. Various inscriptions in Musnad script in the 2nd century CE refer to constructions of synagogues approved by Himyarite kings. The kingdom's aristocracy was eventually to convert to Judaism in the 6th century CE. The Jews became especially numerous and powerful in the southern part of Arabia, a rich and fertile land of incense and spices and a way station on the routes to Africa, India, and the Orient. The tribes in Yemen did not oppose Jewish presence in their country. By 516, tribal unrest broke out and several tribal elites fought for power. One of those elites was Joseph Dunuwas or Yusuf Asar Yatar, as mentioned in ancient South Arabian inscriptions. Yusuf was a converted Jew. Nestorian accounts, however, claim that his mother was a Jewess taken captive from Nisibis and bought by a king in Yemen, whose ancestors had formerly converted to Judaism. Syriac and Byzantine sources maintain that Yusuf Asar sought to convert other Yemeni Christians, but they refused to renounce Christianity. some scholars think is unlikely because Judaism is not missionary in nature, and it is believed that Syriac sources reflected a great deal of hatred toward Jews. In 2009, a BBC broadcast defended a claim that Yusuf Asar offered villagers the choice between conversion to Judaism or death and then massacred 20,000 Christians. The program's producers stated that the production team spoke to many historians over 18 months, among them Nigel Groom, who was our consultant, and Professor Abdul Rahman Al-Ansari, former professor of archaeology at the King Saud University in Riyadh. Inscriptions attributed to Yusuf Asar himself show the great pride he expressed after killing more than 22,000 Christians in Afar and Najran. According to JAMA, Sabian inscriptions reveal that the combined war booty from campaigns waged against the Abyssinians in Ofar, the fighters in Azaran, Rakban, Farasan, Muwan, and the fighters and military units in Najran, amounted to 12,500 war trophies, 11,000 captives and 290,000 camels and bovines and sheep. Historian Glenn Bowersock described this as a savage pogrom that the Jewish king of the Arabs launched against the Christians in the city of Najran. The king himself reported in excruciating detail to his Arab and Persian allies about the massacres he had inflicted on all Christians who refused to convert to Judaism. There were also reports of massacres and destruction of places of worship by Christians too. According to Irfan Shahid's Martyrs of Najran new documents, Dunuwas sent an army of some 120,000 soldiers to lay siege to the city of Najran, which siege lasted for 6 months, and the city taken and burnt on the 15th day of the 7th month. The city had revolted against the king and they refused to deliver it up unto the king. About 300 of the city's inhabitants surrendered to the king's forces, under the assurances of an oath that no harm would come to them, and these were later bound, while those remaining in the city were burnt alive within the church. The death toll in this account is said to have reached about 2,000. However, in the Sabian inscriptions describing these events, it is reported that by the month Du Madran there were 1,000 killed, 1,500 prisoners taken, and 10,000 head of cattle. There are 2 dates mentioned in the letter of Simeon of Beit Arsum. One date indicates the letter was written in Tammuz in the year 830 of Alexander, from the camp of Gbala, king of the Snya. In it he tells of the events that transpired in Najran, while the other date puts the letter's composition in the year 835 of Alexander. The second letter, however, is actually a Syriac copy of the original, copied in the year 1490 of the Seleucid era. Today, it is largely agreed that the latter date is the accurate one, as it is confirmed by the Matria Maritha, as well as by epigraphic records, namely Sabian inscriptions discovered in the Azia of Saudi Arabia, photographed by J. Reichmans in Rai 507, 8-9, and by A. Jama in Yar 1028, which give the old Sabian year 633 for these operations. Jacques Reichmans, who deciphered these inscriptions, writes in his La Persecution des Chrétiens Himyarites that Sarah-Iak Yazan was both the tribal chief and the lieutenant of Yusuf Asar at the time of the military campaign, and that he was sent out by the king to take the city of Najran, while the king watched for a possible Abyssinian-Ethiopian incursion along the coastal plains of Yemen near Mocha and the strait known as Bab al-Mandeb. It is to be noted that the Ethiopian church in Afar, which had been built by the king of Yemen some years earlier, and another church built by him in Aden, had been seen by Constantius II during the embassage to the land of the Amorites in circa 340 CE. This church was set on fire and razed to the ground, and its Abyssinian inhabitants killed. Later, foreigners living in Hadramaut were also put to death before the king's army advanced to Najran in the far north and took it. Byzantine Emperor Justin I sent a fleet to Yemen and Joseph Dunuwas was killed in battle in 525 CE. the persecutions ceased, and the western coasts of Yemen became a tributary state until Himyarite nobility managed to regain power. There are also several historical works which suggest that a Jewish kingdom existed in what is now Yemen during pre-Islamic late antiquity. In Yemen, several inscriptions dating back to the 4th and 5th centuries CE have been found in Hebrew and Sabian praising the ruling house in Jewish terms for helping and empowering the people of Israel. In Beit al-Adair, a village situated near Tanim, Professor Walter Muller also discovered in the central mosque of the village an important Judeo-Emirite inscription showing a partial list of the 24 priestly wards described in I Chronicles chapter 24, which said inscription happened to be engraved upon a column believed to have formerly belonged to a synagogue. Yet, even here, part of the inscription was embedded in the ground belonging to the mosque. The inscription is believed to date back to the 4th century CE, and attests to the antiquity of the Jews in that area. To that same period belongs another bilingual Sabian Hebrew inscription, which Professor Giovanni Garbini of Naples discovered in 1970. The inscription is found on a column in Beit al-Aswal near Rafah, Dhofar, and shows, interposed on an earlier writing, the words, "The writing of Judah, of blessed memory, Amen Shalom Amen," engraved in antiquated Assyrian script in between larger, sculpted Sabian script. Jewish-Muslim relations in Yemen. As Ahl al-Kitab protected peoples of the scriptures, the Jews were assured freedom of religion only in exchange for the jizya, payment of a poll tax imposed on certain non-Muslim monotheists. In exchange for the jizya, non-Muslim residents are then given safety, and also are exempt from paying the zakat, which must be paid by Muslims once their residual wealth reaches a certain threshold. Active persecution of Jews did not gain full force until the Zaydi clan seized power from the more tolerant Sunni Muslims. Early in the 10th century, the Zaydi enforced a statute known as the Orphans' Decree, anchored in their own 18th-century legal interpretations and enforced at the end of that century. It obligated the Zaydi state to take under its protection and to educate in Islamic ways any dhimmi child whose parents had died when he or she was a minor. The Orphans' Decree was ignored during the Ottoman rule, but was renewed during the period of Imam Yahya. Under the Zaydi rule, the Jews were considered to be impure, and therefore forbidden to touch a Muslim or a Muslim's food. They were obligated to humble themselves before a Muslim, to walk to the left side, and greet him first. They could not build houses higher than a Muslim's, or ride a camel or horse, and when riding on a mule or a donkey, they had to sit sideways. Upon entering the Muslim quarter, a Jew had to take off his footgear and walk barefoot. If attacked with stones or fists by youth, a Jew was not allowed to fight them. In such situations he had the option of fleeing or seeking intervention by a merciful Muslim passerby. Yemenite Jews also experienced violent persecution at times. In the 12th century, the Yemenite ruler, Abd al-Nabi ibn Mahdi, left Jews with the choice between conversion to Islam or martyrdom. While a popular local Yemenite Jewish preacher called Jews to choose martyrdom, Maimonides sent what is known by the name Igarat to man, requesting that they remain faithful to their religion, but if at all possible, not to cast affronts before their antagonists. In the 13th century, persecution of Jews subsided when the Rasulids took over the country, ending Zaydi rule and establishing the Rasulid dynasty, which lasted from 1229 to 1474. In 1547, the Ottoman Empire took over Yemen. This allowed Yemenite Jews a chance to have contact with other Jewish communities. Contact was established with the Kabbalists in Safed, a major Jewish center, as well as with Jewish communities throughout the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman rule ended in 1630, when the Zaydis took over Yemen. Jews were once again persecuted. In 1679, under the rule of al-Mahdi Ahmad, Jews were expelled en masse from all parts of Yemen to the distant province of Morza, and many Jews died there of starvation and disease as consequence. As many as two-thirds of the exiled Jews did not survive. Their houses and property were seized, and many synagogues were destroyed or converted into mosques. This event was later known as the Morzan exile, and it is recalled in many writings of the Yemenite Jewish rabbi and poet Shalom Shabazi, who experienced it himself. About a year after the expulsion, the survivors were allowed to return for economic reasons. Jews were the majority of craftsmen and artisans, and thus a vital asset in the country's economy. However, they were not allowed to return to their former homes and found that most of their religious articles had been destroyed. They were instead resettled in special Jewish quarters outside the cities. The Jews of Yemen had expertise in a wide range of trades normally avoided by Zaydi Muslims. Trades such as silversmithing, blacksmiths, repairing weapons and tools, weaving, pottery, masonry, carpentry, shoemaking, and tailoring were occupations that were exclusively taken by Jews. The division of labor created a sort of covenant, based on mutual economic and social dependency, between the Zaydi Muslim population and the Jews of Yemen. The Muslims produced and supplied food, and the Jews supplied all manufactured products and services that the Yemeni farmers needed. During the 18th century, Yemenite Jews gained a brief respite from their status as second-class citizens when the Imamics came to power. Yemen experienced a resurgence of Jewish life. Synagogues were rebuilt, and some Jews achieved high office. One of them was Rabbi Shalom ben Aharon, who became responsible for minting and for the royal coffers. When the Imamics lost power in the 19th century, Jews were again subjected to persecution. In 1872, the Ottoman Empire again took over, and Ottoman rule would last until Yemeni independence in 1918. Jewish life again improved during Ottoman rule. Jewish freedom of religion was more widely respected, and Yemenite Jews were permitted to have more contact with other Jewish communities. Chronology of events. Places of settlement in Yemen. In the years preceding their immigration to Israel, Yemenite Jews lived principally in Sana'a, with the largest Jewish population and 28 synagogues, followed by Radat, with the second largest Jewish population and 9 synagogues. Sada, Damar, Aden, and in more than 1,200 villages scattered across Yemen. Other significant Jewish communities in Yemen were based in the south-central highlands in the cities of Tais, Badan, and other cities and towns in the Sharab region. Many other Jewish towns and villages in Yemen were long since abandoned by their Jewish inhabitants. Yemenite Jews were chiefly artisans, including gold, silver and blacksmiths in the Sana'a area, and coffee merchants in the south-central highland areas. 19th century Yemenite Messianic movements. During this period, Messianic expectations were very intense among the Jews of Yemen. The three pseudo-messiahs of this period, and their years of activity, are Shuk Q Hailai, Shuk Q Hail II, Joseph Abdullah. According to the Jewish traveler Jacob Safir, the majority of Yemenite Jews during his visit of 1862 entertained a belief in the messianic proclamations of Shuk Q Hailai. Earlier Yemenite messiah claimants included the anonymous 12th century messiah who was the subject of Maimonides' famous Iggeret to Man, or Epistle to Yemen, the Messiah of Behan, and Suleiman Jamal, in what Lenowitz regards as a unified Messiah history spanning 600 years. Yemenite Jews are those Jews who live, or once lived, in Yemen. The term may also refer to the descendants of the Yemenite Jewish community. Between June 1949 and September 1950, the overwhelming majority of Yemen's Jewish population was transported to Israel in Operation Magic Carpet. After several waves of persecution throughout Yemen, most Yemenite Jews now live in Israel, while small communities groups in Israel, which have undergone a process of total or partial assimilation to Sephardic culture and Sephardic liturgy. Family pedigrees. Some Jewish families have preserved traditions relating to their tribal affiliation. based on partial genealogical records passed down generation after generation. In Yemen, for example, some Jews trace their lineage to Judah, others to Benjamin, while yet others to Levi and Reuben. Found in the United States and elsewhere, only a handful remain in Yemen. The few remaining Jews experience intense, and at times violent, anti-Semitism on a daily basis. Yemenite Jews have a unique religious tradition that marks them out as separate from Ashkenazi, Sephardi and other Jewish groups. Yemenite Jews are generally described as belonging to Mizrahi Jews, though they differ from the general trend of Mizrahi group. Of particular interest is one distinguished Jewish family of Yemen who traced their lineage to Bani, one of the sons of Peretz, the son of Judah. Early history. There are numerous accounts and legends concerning the arrival of Jews in various regions in southern Arabia. One legend suggests that King Solomon sent Jewish merchant marines to Yemen to prospect for gold and silver with which to adorn his temple in Jerusalem in 1881. The French vice-consulate in Yemen wrote to the leaders of the alliance in France that he read in a book by the Arab historian Abu al-Fada that the Jews of Yemen settled in the area in 1451 BCE. Another legend says that Yemeni tribes converted to Judaism after the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon. The Sanite Jews have a legend that their ancestors settled in Yemen 42 years before